when I was invited to speak, my husband's first thought was, we have esteemed guests and a student that was, graduated from Mandarin school. He's like, why did you get invited? I said, because Ontario doesn't have multilingual, that's why I started a Mandarin school. See how desperation pushes people? And that's why I was invited. So, my name is Yollanda, and just to kind of give you a little background about myself, I'm a very unlikely candidate to have started a Mandarin school. And that just shows you the level of desperation I felt. Yes, Sandra, I know Sandra's smiling because she knows the story. The desperation I felt to have been pushed to this, this place, a happy place, of course. So I'm an engineer, graduated from Waterloo, same as Stephen, and I was working in corporate sales, actually, and marketing. And I really wasn't happy with my job, and somebody had asked me, what would you do if you won the lottery? So I said, oh, I would want to work with children. And he said, you don't need to win the lottery to do that, right? You know that, right? I was like, oh yeah, that's true. I don't. What am I waiting for? So then I actually came to this building, not telling you how many years ago, but a few years ago, and I got my B.Ed, and then I started teaching math and physics. So that were my teachables. So I'm actually still a teacher officially with the TDSB, Toronto District School Board. I'm on leave right now. And that was kind of how I got there. But now, if you ask me the same question, what would you do if you won the lottery? My answer would be, I would buy a building, and I would have each floor to be a different language. One, of course, will have to be Mandarin. It would be a different language, and kids can go and be taught, and they can choose to be taught in different languages.
What a great idea.
Thank you. Because as we all know, this is a slow process. It's not going to happen within her, school age lifetime. And so that's what I would do if I did win the lottery. And so as a result, I did start a Mandarin school. I kind of gave away the ending, but I wanted to kind of show you. Oh, is it possible to go back one slide? Sorry. I kind of clicked the button by mistake. I was too excited when you guys were moving around. So what I wanted to talk about today is a little bit of introductions about my journey learning Mandarin, learning English, including my husband's journey and actually my daughter's. And then I want to talk a bit about what I wanted for my daughter, where the gap was, and what I did to fill that gap. And through that process, I talked to a lot of people. So I wanted to kind of share with you my research process. Definitely not as exhaustive as Dr. Cummins, and definitely not the statistical type of research, but very anecdotal. And then what did I learn from that process? And then also why I started my own Mandarin school to bridge that gap. So a bit of introductions. I kind of told you a little bit about myself. For me, I came to Canada at the age of 10, and of course I was fluent in Mandarin and not fluent in English. And at that time, my parents were very wise in encouraging me to keep my heritage language. That was a time when learning Mandarin was not cool. You're not cool if you could speak Mandarin. You're cool if you can only speak English. I remember one of my parents' friends actually bragged at a dinner party that his son can now no longer speak any Mandarin. And so my parents were like, why is this a good thing? But for them, that meant he was completely now in the Canadian society. And so it was actually really sad, when you think about that, because he has now lost connection to really his family. He can't speak to them anymore in Chinese and in Mandarin. So because of my parents' urging, I kept my Mandarin. I've always been an avid reader, so I continue to read. And now I'm still fluent in speaking, but I see one of my teachers from my Mandarin school here, and she can tell you I'm not fluent in terms of business Mandarin, but I can talk about food and random chit-chat. But in terms of writing, I can't really write anymore. And reading, I can still read, but so definitely it's deteriorated over the years because I've never been educated in Mandarin other than Saturday school. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about my husband. I always use him as a counterexample because he really is. So Brian, my husband, he was born and raised in Toronto. His family was from Hong Kong. And so he, up to the age of 8, he was fluent in Cantonese. He even won some like calligraphy contest at Chinese school, which he always brags about. But then now he can barely speak Cantonese. And one of the sad thing is for me, family is most important to me, and it's that connection to your family that gets lost. So 2 of his grandparents can only speak Cantonese, so they never talk to them. They can't chit-chat. They can't shoot the breeze because he doesn't have enough Cantonese to do that. His brother actually doesn't really speak to them at all, other than like a wave, you know. And I think that's really, really sad. And one of the reasons he was only able to speak Cantonese up to the age of 8 is, any guesses? Why 8? Why did it stop after that? School, right. The use of English in school was a lot more exhaustive by that age. But there's not one other reason. Something happens also to kids when they get older. What happens to kids? Socialization. He had no friends that spoke Cantonese. And when he went to Chinese school, it was out of his schedule. He had to go on a weekend. What are other kids doing on Saturday? Watching cartoons. They're not in Chinese school, I can tell you that. So you know what? Eventually he's like, wait a minute, I don't want to do this. My friends are not doing this. Why am I doing this? And then he has a younger brother. Parents are tired. They're like, fine, enough. You don't want to go, you don't go. You lose Chinese, whatever. And so you choose your battles, right? So that's why my husband is speaking Chinese right now. And that actually gave me a huge sense of urgency for my daughter. And for my daughter to be able to not lose that. So this is Caitlin. I didn't realize she was coming, but she is here today. So this is Caitlin. Caitlin is now 4 years old. And because she has a grandmother that has been a Mandarin teacher for 15 years, our mom that's a bit crazy about Mandarin. She is fluent in speaking Mandarin. She can read picture books. She cannot read in English, but she can read in Chinese because that's the only books I read to her. She can write 4 characters in Chinese. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And she can even input simple characters into my phone using pinyin, which she sends messages to her grandmother. And so this is her now. And so my hope for her is that in the future, when she's 18, so what she can do now is great, way more than her dad, her uncle, and most of their cousins, and my friends. But what really measures success is actually what she can do by the age of 18. What can she actually use Mandarin for? The fluency of the language when they're actually going to use it. And I really need her to be able to speak Mandarin, because if she doesn't, she's not going to be able to speak to my family in China, and they're not going to learn English just for her. And this is one information I don't know if you have read or heard of, is that in 2017, China is taking English out of their final exams. So China, one of the hardest, one of the most difficult obstacles for students is the final exams at high school. So China has decided they're taking that out. They're taking English out. There's more focus placed on Mandarin. So if China as a country, 1.4 billion people have decided English is no longer a priority, guess what? Mandarin better be a priority, especially for people who can speak it. And for me, definitely most importantly, is that I said the connection to her family, her heritage, but also Chinese has a huge amount of knowledge. A huge amount of knowledge is in Chinese, and I would really love for her to not lose access to that. So that's why I would really love for her to be able to learn Mandarin. I want her to be fluent. And another thing I should have mentioned here, and we were talking about multilingual, is that we want to send her to a French immersion school. But another thing is her dad has learned Spanish, and we really want her to learn Spanish as well. I just wish we could do this a little bit more seamlessly, you know, and not having to do carting around to different schools and weekends. And so, but that's my hope. If I won the lottery, ... So, in the process of feeling this sense of urgency that my daughter may not be able to keep her cultural heritage, I talked to a lot of different people.